The conflict between Israel and Palestine is a dispute over the ownership of Palestinian territory, and is at the center of current political and diplomatic debates. The dispute intensified at the end of the 20th century, starting in 1948, when the State of Israel was declared. Origin of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Palestine is located between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea in the Middle East, and until the beginning of World War I in 1914. It was under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. With the dissolution of this empire, England took control of the region in 1917. It is estimated that by the end of 1946, Palestine was inhabited by about 1.2 million Arabs and 608,000 Jews. After the conflict, Jews initiated a series of migratory movements in an attempt to find a new home after the persecutions in Europe. Thus, the area came to be dominated by Jews after the end of World War II. For this people, the region is called the Holy Land and the Promised Land. But the concept of a sacred place is also shared by Muslims and Christians. Causes of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The causes of the conflict are deep-rooted, with a significant historical event being the expulsion of Jews by the Romans in 70 AD, forcing them to move to North Africa and Europe in the 19th century. Amid the rise of nationalism in Europe, some Jews rallied around the Zionist ideas of the Hungarian Theodor Herzl, 1860–1904. He advocated that the home for Jews should be in Zion or the land of Israel, Palestine, and eventually, Jews would have a home like other peoples. At the end of World War II, 1945, Zionist Jews began pressuring for the creation of the Jewish state. During the conflict, 6 million Jews were exterminated in concentration camps under the orders of Adolf Hitler, 1889–1945. Thus, with international support, primarily through American action, the region was divided in 1948–1949 into three parts: the State of Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. The division, planned by the United Nations (UN), envisaged allocating 55% of the territory to the Jews, while 44% would remain with the Palestinians. The cities of Bethlehem and Jerusalem were to be considered international territory due to their religious significance for Muslims, Jews, and Christians. However, Arab representatives did not accept these determinations. Foundation of the State of Israel. On May 14, 1948, Israel was founded following the withdrawal of the British. The next day, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and Iraq invaded Israel, initiating the War of Independence. Referred to as Nakba or catastrophe by the Arabs, the war concluded in 1949, resulting in the expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians who became refugees in a movement known as the Nakba Exodus. As a consequence of the Palestinian expulsion, Israel expanded its territory by 50%, occupying 78% of the area designated for Palestine, according to the UN. The international community did not question this action until 1956, when Israel contested control over the Suez Canal with Egypt and gained exploitation rights as per the UN's determination. In 1959, the PLO Palestine Liberation Organization was founded, but it was only recognized by the UN in 1974. However, a new conflict emerged in 1967, resulting in victories for Israel. In the Six-Day War, Israel occupied the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights in Syria. As a result, 500,000 Palestinians fled, and the UN Security Council approved Resolution 242. This resolution deems the acquisition of territories by force as inadmissible and asserts the right of all states in the region to coexist peacefully. The Arabs attempt to reclaim the territory occupied in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War, Jewish Holy -1, which lasted from October 6 to October 26. However, it is only in 1979 that Israel returns the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt after the signing of a peace agreement. Biblical perspective. The reasons for establishing the Jewish state in the region were based on biblical sources. Jews consider the area between Africa and the Middle East, where Palestine is located, as the promised land God gave to the prophet Abraham. This corresponds to the territories now occupied by the State of Israel, Palestine, the West Bank, Western Jordan, Southern Syria, and Southern Lebanon. The so-called biblical patriarchs received it after the Exodus. This is the claim of Zionist Jews who demand the full occupation of the territory. Before the post-war occupation, 4% of the population of Palestine was Jewish. The right stemming from the biblical promise is rejected by Arabs, who argue that Abraham's son, Ishmael, is their ancestor, thus, God's promise would also include them. Additionally, the Palestinians' claim is based on the right to occupation that occurred over 13 centuries. Occupation of Palestine. The region was occupied around 2000 BC by Amorites, Canaanites, and Phoenicians, referred to as the land of Canaan. The arrival of Hebrews of Semitic origin occurred between 1800 and 1500 BC. Successive invasions marked the region's history. In 538 BC, Persian commander Cyrus the Great occupied the region, later retaken in an invasion led by Alexander the Great in 331 BC. Roman invasion under Pompey's leadership took place in 64 BC. Roman rule persisted until 634 AD, when the Arab conquest marked the beginning of 13 centuries of Muslim presence in Palestine. Under Arab rule, Palestine witnessed multiple crusades between 1099 and 1291, and in 1517, Ottoman occupation began, lasting until 1917. After French invasions led by Napoleon Bonaparte 1769 to 1821, Palestine comes under the rule of Egypt, and an Arab revolt begins in 1834. It's only in 1840 that the Treaty of London ends Egyptian dominance in the region, and in 1880, Arab autonomy movements commence. In 1917, Palestine is subjected to British mandate, which lasts until February 1947, when Britain relinquishes control, handing over the majority of military equipment to Zionist groups. The conflict persists, leaving thousands of Arabs in refugee camps. The Palestinian National Authority seeks UN approval for Palestinian state autonomy and demands the removal of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, a situation condemned by the International Court of Justice, but continues. Palestinians also insist that the future Palestinian state borders align with the pre-1967 structure and aspire to the return of 10 million refugees to the region now occupied by Israel. Meanwhile, Israel contends for the entirety of Jerusalem, a claim rejected by the Hague Convention. In 2023, the Palestinian group Hamas conducted a historic attack on Israel, resulting in over 1,000 casualties and dozens taken hostage on the first day of the conflict. The Israeli government, led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, expressed regret over the deaths, citing a failure in the defense system known as the Iron Dome and intelligence agencies. Despite lamenting the losses, the Israeli leader pledged retaliation, raising international fears of an escalation in conflicts and more casualties in the field. Israel holds the military and economic advantage. In 2002, the Israeli government, under the leadership of Ariel Sharon 1928 to 2014, initiated the construction of a wall in the West Bank. The barrier, built under the pretext of protecting Israel from Palestinian attacks, separates local communities from arable areas. Despite international criticism, the project was maintained. New attacks were launched in 2014 by Israel against the West Bank. It was the most violent offensive since 2005, when a ceasefire occurred following the promise to withdraw Jewish settlements from Palestinian territories.